This episode of the Sacred Sons podcast is brought to you by ButcherBox. ButcherBox is a monthly subscription service that delivers high-quality meats right to your doorstep. At Sacred Sons, we understand the importance of fueling our bodies with real organic food, and that nourishment is essential for an embodied life. ButcherBox makes it easy. Their beef is 100% grass-fed and grass-finished. Their chicken is free-range and organic, and their pork is heritage breed and raised with care. Not only is ButcherBox's meat of the highest quality, but they also prioritize sustainable and ethical farming practices. Their commitment to responsible sourcing means you can feel good about the meat that you're putting on your plate. I know that those of us that have families, having these quality foods is of the utmost importance. And it's incredibly convenient. Their monthly subscription model means you always have a supply of high-quality meat on hand without having to worry about making trips to the grocery store. Our family has been ordering from ButcherBox for years. A couple of our favorites are the ribeye, put those bad boys on the grill, and the baby back ribs, slow cooked in the oven for 4 hours with a little bit of barbecue sauce. Hits the spot. And as a special offer right now, you can get free bone-in chicken thighs with your order and $20 off your first box. Nourish your body and mind with high-quality meats delivered to your doorstep from ButcherBox. Visit butcherbox.com to learn more and take advantage of these limited-time special offers. Much love, fam. Grand Rising Soul Family. Adam Jackson here with another episode of the Sacred Sons podcast. It's that time of year again. It's that season. We're going to go in. We're going to talk about addiction. We're going to talk about some of the sorrows, some of the parts of this life experience that really push us to our edges. And with that, today's guest, his name is Matt Brown. And Matt has years of experience in this field of sobriety interventions and beyond. And I'm looking forward to, hearing a little bit about his journey and in hopes that it can inspire some brothers who are out there listening and who need it. And Sacred Sons, I am just returning from EMX San Diego. That is the Embodied Masculine Experience. We had 85 brothers out in the high desert of Jacumba, California, circled up with one mission in our heart. And that's the remembrance of who we truly are. We showed up in service. We showed up in connection, confrontation, celebration, and awareness. And I'm just so blown away by the men who are coming out, who are really feeling this mission and who are feeling the call. Because that's really what it is. Matt, you have any experience with men's work in your life?
I do a little bit. I've worked on some of my own issues with men, past traumatic experiences, working through my own addiction and recovery, working with other men has been extremely fulfilling. It's created an opportunity for me to be accountable with men that I trust. It's created an opportunity for me to get vulnerable when otherwise, as men in today's world, it's counterintuitive for a lot of us to feel like we can let our guard down and let other people see us.
Yes, that vulnerability is the gateway. It is a superpower. And if you are interested, we have our Sacred Sons immersion happening all around the globe. The immersion is a 2-day experience. And this is just like what Matt's saying. It's an opportunity to get with some other men, to share your story, to vulnerably drop in, to move your body, to say the things that need to be said, maybe even a little bit of screaming. I heard there's wrestling. I've seen some striking out there happening. If you are interested, please go to sacredsons.com and click on the calendar. So stoked to see this work really happening and to see these brothers showing up. Again, if you are interested, please go to sacredsons.com. All right. And with that, our guest today, he's the co-host of the Party Wreckers podcast. He's the man behind Freedom Interventions. and he has led over 1,000 interventions to help families and individuals find lasting recovery from addiction. Please welcome Matt Brown.
Thank you, Adam. I can't tell you what an honor it is to be here with you today. I've been turned on to your podcast recently by my own therapist as we're doing some work on masculine identity and, that little boy inside of me. And from the time that I started listening to you guys, it really just connected with the work that I'm already doing. So I appreciate you guys having me on today and letting me be a part of this.
Beautiful. Yeah, man. Like I said, this work is so needed. There is the men's workspace. There's empowerment. There's embodiment work. And we know that some of the deepest suffering is around this topic of addiction. And so you mentioned your little boy, and I'm going to kind of just jump in here. When I grew up, it was all about DARE, drug abuse resistance education. I also grew up straight edge. I was actually, my story's a little different than most. I was straight edge all the way up until I was 31. I never touched a drop of alcohol. I never touched ganja, marijuana, tobacco. My mom went to Al-Anon. My father was an alcoholic, so it was beaten to me like, stay away from this, and almost to a fault. Almost to the point where it became abstinence became my identity. And so I just wanted to share a little bit about who I am with you. And now I got my coffee. I enjoy the occasional spliff here and there. But
there you go.
All jokes aside, it's real. I'm also addicted to sugar. It comes in all forms. So I'm really looking forward to get these tools. Before we do that, I want to invite us to take a deep breath for ourselves. Dropping into this present moment, scanning the body, feeling what is alive. And Matt, on this beautiful day, what is most alive within you?
Wow, that's a deep question. I love the work that I get to do. I love the opportunity that I get to go in and meet people on what most of the times is the worst day of their life. Their addiction is at a point where it's beyond control. It never really was under control, but even the illusion of control is beginning to crumble. The families are desperate because, of course, they're seeing their loved one deteriorate and begin to experience consequences, whether those are legal or medical or relational. And to be able to go in and be that voice of hope for somebody, it's what I was put on this earth to do. And yes. I had to go through my own story to really get to where I'm at today. I would not be as effective, I don't think, if I hadn't gone through, the nightmare of my own addiction.
Let's jump right into it, if you don't mind. I know that you have 20 years of sobriety.
Yeah.
Give us a picture of what life looked like 20 plus years ago, 21 years ago. What did life look like?
Yeah. So I took my first drink when I was 18 years old. I didn't quite understand what was going to happen that day, but I also didn't understand just how completely uncomfortable in my own skin I was until I felt that buzz come on. And it was like, okay, all this other stuff went away, all the anxiety, all the insecurity, the anger, the rage, the fear. It was like, oh, okay, let's do this again tomorrow. And it had nothing to do with the taste of the alcohol. It had nothing to do with the environment that I was in. It was a change that happened inside of me where it was like, I didn't even realize these feelings were there until this magic potion in this bottle made it all go away. And from that day on, with some exception, but very little, I was intoxicated or under the influence of something all the way up until I was 30 years old.
Wow.
And it, of course, started out fun. Hey, this is great. I found a way to escape. I found a way to not have to feel all these things that I was feeling. And I found a way to make the good times even better. And slowly by slowly, things started to get worse. I ended up getting divorced. I ended up losing job after job after job. And, I was working in the entertainment field in Los Angeles, or at least trying to. Minimal success. I would certainly not put myself up there with anybody that was successful in that field, but I was given it a good try. And
yeah, there's very few who really make it out there.
Yeah. The illusion was still alive, though. Right. I continued to reach out to my family, though.
I wonder if even part of that illusion of celebrity is a piece of the addiction too. Like, how am I going to make this sustainable? Because it's not working here. Let me make it in Hollywood. So
Well, what better way for a guy who doesn't want to be who he is or feel what he's feeling to make a living than to pretend to be something else?
Powerfully said.
And that's what I had hoped to do. And every dollar there towards the end was going towards cocaine, methamphetamines, and alcohol. And that was just getting beyond financial control for sure, but certainly well beyond my emotional control.
Yeah. And
I continued to reach out to my family. My family, I grew up in a home that was extremely religious, almost I would describe as orthodox. I grew up in a Mormon family, and alcohol, of course, drugs, tobacco, coffee, tea, none of that stuff is acceptable. And so right. I was lucky to have parents that they loved me enough, but they were also naive enough to get manipulated. And I would continue to call them up and sing them a sad song and say, hey guys, I'm really struggling here. Not making enough to pay the bills, or, whatever the story was for that day. And this was, before the days of PayPal or Venmo or any of those apps. And, a few days later, a check would show up, and I got them to enable me time and time and time again. Well, unbeknownst to me, I'd grown up in Arizona. And two of my buddies from high school were now living in California with me in Los Angeles. What I didn't realize is that they were calling my family, going, hey, you probably ought to stop sending him some money, because here's what's really going on. And they gave them probably a little cleaner version than what was really happening, but enough to let them know that I was struggling. And the last time that I called them, God bless them, they said, we have a pretty good idea of what's going on, so we're not going to send you any more money. But here's what we'll do. We'll drive out to LA. Whatever you can fit in the car, you can bring back home with you. Whatever you can't, you got to be willing to walk away from it. And the reality was I couldn't say yes fast enough, because I'm getting away from all the drug dealers that I owe money to. I'm picking up from a life that I really had become hateful of. And I was going to go start over.
Yeah. Was this kind of your first intervention? This is your first time the family's intervening? Is this the first time this kind of thought comes to you?
It was the first time that they had said no, I guess, in that way. There was always kind of this token we can't keep doing this, but the check would show up anyway. And so even though they were saying they couldn't do it, it would happen. And so this time it looked a little bit different, but it was enabling nonetheless. And I'm not saying that out of criticism. I think that my family and every other family that I've ever worked with, they're doing the best they can.
Yeah.
Nobody ever sets out to say, hey, you know what? I think I'm going to make my son's addiction worse today. Nobody does that. But they didn't realize that their attempts to keep me from really experiencing what the natural consequences were of some of the choices that I was making and some of the ways that I was living were really keeping me artificially supported. I wasn't really living the life that I needed to live.
Yeah, I was just going to say, man, it's so hard for parents and their children. I'm a father. You're a father as well?
I am, yeah.
We love our children so much, and it's not that maybe we love them to a fault. Maybe children these days are spoiled as ever. And when I know about love, it's just that parents will never give up on their children. You know what I'm saying?
I do. And I think, like I said, we get the line between love and support blurred sometimes.
Yeah.
I think love should always be unconditional.
Yes.
But when you're dealing with somebody like me, if you offer me unconditional support, man, will I take advantage of that.
Wow. And a lot of addicts will, because many are powerless to that addiction. And so what you're saying about taking advantage of the generosity is kind of a common theme I imagine you encounter.
It is. And it kind of gets back to your point that you made earlier about the DARE program or Nancy Reagan's motto, just say no.
Right.
Like, if I could have just said no, man, this would never have been an issue. If it really, I mean, that whole program of just say no really implied that it was a choice. Nobody wakes up.
If it's not a choice, what is it?
Okay. So I do believe it's a disease. When you look at it from the standpoint of it will get progressively worse if it goes untreated. Now, here's what else I'll say. I believe that addiction is a medical disease with a spiritual solution. Science has not been able to produce something that we could call cure addiction. You know, there's things, there's good medications that help people go through withdrawal. There's good, therapy that really gets down to it. But at the core, until we get right spiritually, whatever that looks like, and I'm not prescribing any kind of a religious solution here. But on a much deeper level, what is our identity? What principles are we going to live by?
Yeah.
And how do we make the past right? Because until the past is made right, we're going to hang on to it. And so I think that when you look at it from that standpoint, until we treat the disease, it's going to get worse. Now, it may not always be drugs or alcohol. I've seen plenty of people that have said, you know what, I quit drinking. And I'm looking at a guy who's overweight, who works 80 hours a week.
Yeah.
Or I'm looking at a guy who's, 2% body fat and is in the gym 3 hours a day. Or, somebody who's watching pornography day in and day out. Like the cross addiction, as sometimes we call it, it'll show up some way, because it's all about, I've got to find a way to not feel what I'm feeling. I have no ability internally to regulate how I feel. And so I've got to find an external solution to that internal problem.
Yeah, I think it's important to note here that this is not an American problem, a European problem. I would say that mind-altering states have been sought after through human culture all throughout time and history. I think that's fair to say and to point out.
Absolutely.
And this disease of addiction, I feel like, is also a part of many different cultures, and we just happen to be born into a time of ultimate access, of ultimate freedom, if you live in North America here, and that in itself is going to, I just imagine, push addiction rates through the roof. The amount of access that we have, you can literally get stuff delivered to your door like DoorDash. You know what I'm saying? It's a wild time. It's a wild time to be an addict.
It is. And it's easier than it ever has been. But, you talk about, historically people looking for mind altering states. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Right.
Whether it's peyote, whether it's ayahuasca, whether it's mushrooms, whether it's LSD, whether it's any other mind altering substance. It's just that if you're wired like I am, if you have the traumatic experiences that I had growing up and haven't healed from those yet, there's probably going to be a problem along the way. And so I'm certainly not going to come on here saying, hey, everybody needs to avoid drugs and alcohol. Like if I were what we call a normie, like if I could drink alcohol and use drugs normally, man, you and I would be having a very different conversation right now, because it's, and the vast majority of people in this world can go out and have even a mind altering substance that produces a spiritual experience and never say, you know what? If one of those did that, I wonder what would happen if I took 3 or 4 or 5. Like, that's what addiction will do to me, is like, well, if one's good, then 10's got to be better.
I hear you. And I see that happening in these plant medicine spaces. I see people showing up week after week, month after month, chasing, and that's a reality in even in conscious communities, like addiction is present. And that's the piece that I'm in agreement with. You know, if we were to say that, oh, everyone should just abstain from everything, we're back to Nancy Reagan, just say no.
Exactly.
And so we have to be extremely real about it. Let me send you back here. So your parents pick you up. They pull you out of hell. What happens next?
So I head back to Arizona to the home that I grew up in, and had every intention. I mean, they were very clear with me. Like, if you're going to come back home, you've got to quit drinking. You've got to quit using drugs. You got to get a job. And I'm thinking, okay, I could do that. And I wanted to do that. Within just a couple of days, I was sitting on a bar stool at a bar talking to a new drug dealer.
Shit.
You know, and not even thinking twice about it. And after a couple of weeks, my parents woke me up one day and handed me a couple of suitcases, and they said, son, we love you, but we can't keep doing this anymore. We cannot continue to operate like this. We didn't realize what we were bringing into our home.
Yes.
We didn't realize how bad this was. And so you're either going to go get some help today, or you're going to find another place to live. And, you know, of course, to say it politely, I didn't have enough middle fingers. I was outraged. How dare you not take care of me? How dare you throw me away like this? You're my parents. This is your job. You know, pushing every button I possibly could to manipulate them into changing their mind. And I remember my mom, you know, here we are 20 years later, and this still just hits home with me. And I share this with many of the families that I work with. My mom said to me that day, she said, Matt, I am never going to be a prisoner in my own home ever again. And at the time, I was so completely entitled. Yeah. Like, what are you talking about, prisoner in your own home? Woman, you're lucky to be breathing the same air I am. I'm a joy to be around, you know, not knowing the reality of what my life was. And it's only been after the fact that I can look back and see, like, yeah, I was holding my family hostage, and it wasn't out of malice. Like, I love them.
Wow.
But the fear that I was creating in her life, in my dad's life, and I have 5 younger brothers and sisters, and you know, the neglect that they were experiencing because all the attention and all the resources had to go to me. Like, it was a nightmare. Damn. And so I left. I didn't get help that day. I took off, and I really didn't have a lot of contact with my family for the next 2 years. I thought, all right, that's it. Fuck you guys. I'm going to go out there, and I'm going to figure this out on my own. And I'm going to show you
the addiction is that strong. It manipulated into casting aside your own family.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Because I felt misunderstood, and I felt justified, and I felt like I was the victim. And if, you know, of course, in any story, if there's a victim, there's got to be a villain.
Right.
And it wasn't the addiction. It was my parents. They were not willing to understand what I needed. They were not willing to give me what I wanted. And that's the way that enabling and entitlement and manipulation all kind of blend together in this ugly mess. And they'd had enough. And so I took off and you know, found people to sleep on couches, or, you know, sleep in their guest room, or, you know, for the last 6 months of those 2 years, I was living in my truck. And I was driving from Phoenix. I thought I had this perfectly alcoholic idea that I was going to go and start over in Vegas. I'm like, I got enough money in my pocket to get to Vegas. I'm going to go start over in Vegas, and that's where my luck will change. You know, it's a ridiculous idea. But the universe intervened, and my truck broke down in this little town between Phoenix and Vegas called Wickenburg, Arizona. Little tiny, you know, gold mining town from the 1800s, you know, dude ranch town now. What I didn't realize at the time is there were 3 different treatment centers there.
Wow.
In this town of about 7,500, 10,000 people.
Just to pause here, because I love to acknowledge the miracles. And I know as you look back, you have to say that was a divine intervention. This is God
Without
at work. This is my spirit, my protectors, whatever you believe. You have to say, like, there was a reason that I broke down. Wow.
Yeah. And I struggled. You know, I shoplifted food from the local grocery store. You know, in Arizona, they sell liquor at grocery stores. I would shoplift liquor. I was not done. here I am living in like a 1981 Chevy S10 pickup truck that now barely ran. Certainly, I landed in Wickenburg because my truck started to sputter as I was going through there. And I thought, well, either I'm going to stop here or I'm going to break down in the middle of the desert between here and Vegas. So I stopped in Wickenburg. And so I couldn't really go anywhere for fear of breaking down somewhere else. And that was it. Like I survived for those 6 months. And walking around town, I had seen where 12-step meetings were. And one day I woke up and I just had this moment where, like they say, the moment of clarity, where I said, okay, you know what? I think it's time to maybe look into something. So I went to a meeting that day, and it was a Sunday morning, and it was what they call a gratitude meeting, where these people sit around and they talk about how grateful they are. And now I got to listen to these guys talk about how grateful they were to be alcoholics. And I got to listen to these guys talk about how grateful they were to have the struggles in their life. And I'm thinking, this is bullshit. How can these people possibly be grateful for this? I'm miserable here. And one of the old guys in the room, he turned to me, there was only like 6 or 7 guys in this meeting that morning. And he said, hey, is there anything you want to say? And I said, I think I'll just listen today. And he looked at me and said, if you really want to get sober, if you really want to make some changes, probably a good idea for you to share something today. And
he called you in.
He did. And for the first time in my life, I said, my name's Matt and I'm an alcoholic. And something broke loose inside of me in that moment. And I started to cry for the first time in a long time, where it was like one of the first honest things I'd actually said probably in years. And I just let it go. And of course I looked around, after kind of composing myself, here I was with my head in my hands and snot coming out of my nose and just unable to hang on to get control again of this emotional state that I was in. And I expected to look up and see these men just kind of looking at me going, what a sucker. This is disgusting. Why would he?
You expected judgment. You expected to be rejected. You expected the story that you've been telling yourself to play out, the story you've been telling yourself about yourself.
Yeah, I've been rejecting myself for years. I've been abandoning myself for years. And so that's exactly what I had expected. And so when I looked up and I saw these men with just these kind smiles on their faces, and they were just kind of sitting there nodding their heads like, yeah, bud, we get it. We get it. And they came up and they gave me a hug and they said, hey, would you come back tomorrow? And I mean, I'll be honest with you, that was the first time I got invited back somewhere for a long time too. Like I'd get invited places, but most of the time that was where the invitation stopped. I got invited back and, they had coffee, they had donuts, and I was hungry. And so, I didn't go back thinking, I think I want to be sober. I mean, honestly, I just
went back for the connection. I have to imagine here.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. The fellowship is really what got me first. And I didn't want really to stay sober. I wasn't sure what that life was going to look like. I knew that I was sure that I didn't want the life that I had.
Yeah.
But I was very unsure about what this might look like. And so as I continued to go back and that fellowship continued to strengthen, I started to see that these people were real. Like they were really happy. And they weren't drinking, they weren't using drugs, and they'd found a way to find happiness in spite of it. And so that's where I finally said, okay, I think I can do this. And, the first day that I went to a meeting was April 6th, 2003. And so, April 6th of 2023 will be 20 years for me. And so, that doesn't mean that my life has been, rainbows and unicorns. There's been some really tough times and that hasn't changed. I've just got a new set of tools today to be able to get through it.
So coming back to the present, how has it shaped your understanding and your experience of gratitude? Where you are now, 20 years later, can you see how life is happening for you and not to you? And have you been able to find gratitude for the thing that was killing you the most?
I now understand why those men sat around that room being grateful for being alcoholics and being grateful for the adversity that they had faced. Most of it self-inflicted, but at the same time, grateful nonetheless. And I understand now the blessing of that struggle. You know, when life is going really easy, it's easy to put on that mask and say, hey, look at me. Look how great things are. Look at my social media. Look at all this and see how great my life is. But when things get hard, man, that's when the truth comes out. You know, and that's one of the, like when I started getting to know more about what you guys do, when I saw that there was this physical component to it, whether you call it sparring or wrestling, like I got really into martial arts after I got sober. And one of the things that I really loved about that is like, you cannot lie to yourself when you're out on the mat.
Yeah.
Like, and it doesn't have to be anger filled. It doesn't, but it's this moment of truth where it's like, this man is going to get the truth out of me in a physical way. And I'm going to get to know myself in a deeper way because of what I'm about to go through and allow myself to go through. And I think that crosses, you know, a whole lot of other different areas of our lives where if we allow ourselves to really sit into that adversity and kind of go through that refiner's fire, if you will, and allow that to purify us.
Yes.
It's painful in the moment, but the finished product gets better and better all along.
To go through the forge, you know, to be forged in that, to use, you know, those pieces of our own suffering, to use the pain, to allow the pain to forge us into better men, right? And you spoke to those standards. I wanted to say here, that it's so simple, because what you're actually finding maybe in that room, in that 12-step, or in the jiu-jitsu gym, or in the Muay Thai club, it's connection. And it's physical, and we're coming back into contact with other human beings again. We've been separated by technology, by media, by COVID. You know, the dominant culture has some agenda to keep us separated. And you come back into these spaces of connection. And then what happens once we're connected? Full presence. When you're sparring, when you're rolling, there's no thinking, did you forget to turn off the coffee pot at home? There's no thinking, I got to get the TPS report done on Monday. It's full presence.
Yeah.
It's full presence. And that's why we use those tools. That's why we use martial arts as a mechanism to get men into their truth, to get men into the truth, not only of who they are and, you know, who's going to choke out who, or who's going to best the other. But when we're physically, mentally, and emotionally exhausted, and there's nothing left in the tank, all there is truth. And sometimes what happens in those spaces, and we're doing it intentionally, you know, so I know it happens in the gyms unintentionally, and we're doing it to get men to these spaces of clear authenticity. What happens is they're saying things that they're maybe speaking to for the first time ever. They're being real about things that are happening in their life in real time that they want to work on. You know, they're being real about the fact that maybe they've been absent. Maybe they've been missing their children. And so what we get an opportunity to do is witness them in that truth and reflect back to them these parts of goodness that really are alive within them. And so I just wanted to throw that out there as just kind of like, this is a part of the why.
Well, and as men, as human beings, we need that. We need to be visible and to be accepted in spite of our deficiencies, in spite of the judgment that we put on ourselves. Like I said, it's so easy to reject oneself, but the pain of being rejected by somebody else is so much worse. And to be able to be transparent with people who understand the gift of acceptance.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing.
Yes. It's one of our agreements, actually. When we step into our spaces, we make agreements in acceptance and non-judgment. There are very few spaces on planet Earth, where you can step into, and it's a space of full acceptance. And it doesn't mean that judgments don't arise. It doesn't mean we get to drop our discernment at the door. The discernment is at an all-time high. It's just that, are we willing to accept what other men have to share, in their stories? And so I want to go into the tools here, because I love to give some practical tools. I said earlier, you have led over 1,000 interventions.
I have.
I mean, this is powerful work, and I want to honor you and acknowledge you for not only those 1,000, but for the ripples, because within those interventions, and I imagine they're not all successful, but like the ripples of impact that makes beyond just the person, but into the family and into the generations that are to come. What has been your experience of stepping into the homes and hearts of these families that you work with?
Well, initially I'm invited in by the family, because they have tried to have a conversation that creates some change unsuccessfully up to that point. And to be invited in is a responsibility and an honor that I take very, very seriously, because I was the guy that would have been selling that guy drugs or that girl drugs. I would have been the person taking advantage of them. And to now be in a position where I'm invited in, it's a blessing. And to be able to sit across from that person, having, given the family some training and some coaching on, here's how I want this to go, and here's what you should do, here's what you shouldn't do, and really kind of give some structure to it and give them an opportunity to say the most powerful things in the most powerful way to create hope. Like, we're not there to convince somebody to stop drinking or using drugs. We're not there just to simply sell somebody on the idea of going to treatment. My job is to create an environment where that person can finally have some hope that this decision that we're asking them to make is going to give them something that they don't have right now. The question that I usually ask somebody at an intervention isn't like, how much are you drinking? How much are you using? How often? Who with? The thing that I want everybody to focus on is, hey, are you happy? And if you're not, that's okay. Like, I get it. I've been there. And while the details of your story and my story may be very different, I think we both know what it means to feel sad or angry or scared or insecure or lonely. And that's what drives this problem for people like us. I don't know how to handle those feelings. And so to really connect with that person, even though the details may be different, to be able to say, I can understand. I may be the only person in this room, even though we're meeting for the first time today, I may be the only person in this room that really understands what it is you're going through.
Yeah.
And I'm going to ask you to do something monumentally hard, but I'm also going to tell you that you don't have to live one more day the way that you're living right now. This can change real fast.
Wow.
And to really give them that hope that life can be better, and all the shame and all the guilt and all the worry, the fear, all that we carry around, we can finally start to let go of that.
Wow. So are you utilizing the 12 steps as part of your teaching, or do you have a system? Do you have your own intuitive gift?
Yeah.
What is it when you step into those spaces that you use as like, cool, now that I've got your attention, here's step one?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, the intervention is really the moment where we want to see them make a decision and then take action.
Yeah.
The 12 steps is really, I don't even want to call it treatment, because it's not, it's a way to live sober. And that's how I began my journey, and to some degree still do. But I think that there's much more to it. And so I don't want somebody to feel like they have to have that first step experience where you have to admit you're an alcoholic and your life is unmanageable. Like, that's not what we're looking for on day one. It's really, there is a model, or several different intervention models out there. Vernon Johnson was a guy, he was a minister back in Minnesota back in like the 60s and 70s, who really came up with the first formal model for interventions called the Johnson model. And many people still do it today, where you see them, write letters and read letters. The TV show intervention really is kind of we would say today is kind of the Johnson model. And to a large degree, I use some of that structure. There are some other intervention models that are more invitational in nature, where we're actually going to, instead of surprising the person on the day of the intervention, which I do a lot, sometimes we invite them to be a part of it and say, hey, we're going to have a meeting. And in this meeting, we're going to talk about some of the things that are affecting our family. And we want you to be a part of that meeting.
Let me stop you right here. I know there's some parents listening. I know there's some maybe brothers who are dealing with addiction listening. If you have a family member who's like, man, they're not even going to come to the table on this, and I have to imagine this isn't about forcing, but you are saying you're surprising. What advice would you give someone to bring a friend or loved one to the table, to the conversation?
I think that trying to do it one-on-one is a tough road. I think that for most people that I work with, they've tried that, and there's hope there. There's emotional buttons that get pushed, and we, especially as parents, we want, if this is a child that's being intervened on, even somebody in their 20s or 30s, we want to believe them. Maybe this time they are telling me the truth. If it's a spouse, there's always that emotional investment involved. And so I think sometimes it's not always necessary, but having somebody who doesn't have that emotional button that can get pushed in that experience is a way to level the playing field. But to maybe get a group of people together, a group of concerned loved ones, a group of family members, and to be able to say, we're going to have a different kind of conversation today. And we love you. We're here because we love you and we want to see you happy, but this is something that's been affecting us. And we want to offer you an opportunity to get some help. Yes.
Yeah. I feel like that structure is a part of embodied masculinity as well. And not that it's, it's different between men and women, but masculine energy is setting the structure, is calling in that conversation, is saying, hey, this is going to be different. And we have the energetic capacity to hold this in a way where we're like this. We're not speaking lightly. We're not condescending. We're not making jokes here. Like, we're going to set this space because we care about you deeply, and because we're deeply wishing to connect.
Yeah, and when I work with a family, we'll do a rehearsal meeting the night before, and there's some homework that I go over with them in that meeting. But the main purpose of that meeting is to create confidence. Like part of the conversation is not verbal. Part of the conversation is just that person looking around the room, seeing confidence and compassion and love and kindness. And that completely can disarm a lot of that resistance sometimes, to be able to look around the room and know, you know what, I probably could have a different conversation today. I probably could get honest about a few things today. And to have that container where it's like, okay, we're even just from the visible aspect of what we're bringing to this, it can be different. We don't have to be anxiety filled or fear filled or filled with judgment. This can be a place where we just say, you know what, we're here because we love you.
Yeah.
And it's time. It's time. Like, it's not whether you're struggling or not. Like, we don't need to know the details.
Yeah.
We're not here to diagnose the problem, but there is a problem, and we want to get you to a place where that problem can be treated.
That's beautiful. So what's the return? What's on the other side? What have you seen? Are there any moments, stories that stand out to you as like, wow, if the world only knew, that this was possible, that change is possible?
Man, there are so many of them. Doing the work that I do, I generally see the front end. Like, this is a crisis. It's kind of like the difference between somebody working in an emergency room and somebody working in a private practice. I'm kind of on the front end where we're worried about stopping the bleeding.
Yeah.
The treatment of the injury happens down the line, but that the bleeding has to stop first. But I do stick with families until their loved one has completed treatment, or whatever level of care we're asking them to engage in, and to really see that, it's a roller coaster in the beginning. Like, it's not just, hey, they're in treatment and now life is going to be great. Oh, no, all those behaviors, all those thoughts, all those problems are still there. And so that support has to really stay intact. But on the other side of it, I mean, it's wonderful, around Christmas time to get a card from a family or even from an individual that I've worked with to say, hey, I'm okay. And now with social media, I've got some people that I stay connected to on social media that some of them are working in this field, not necessarily as interventionists. Some are, but some are working in treatment programs. Some have become therapists, some have become just really solid mentors to other people in this process. And so to be able to see that, never would I want to take credit for the work they did, but to be a part of that conversation and be a part of that, that catalytic moment where they get to make that decision and travel with them, whether it's by car or by plane, and just have that conversation of hope as we're getting them to that place to get some help. It's a beautiful thing most of the time. But, once we're traveling, the conversation is, I wonder why they waited so long. Or I knew this was going to happen. Or I'm glad this happened. I did an intervention in New York not too long ago. There was a man who'd been sober for 25 years. And he relapsed. And it got to the point where it was affecting his family financially. It was affecting the way that he parented his daughters. And we sat down with him, and within a very short amount of time, he agreed to get help. And on the way there, he's like, even after 25 years of sobriety, I didn't know how to ask for help.
Oh,
I didn't know. And to really like have this moment where it was like, you didn't have to. We're here for you. Like, we can see you.
Wow. It's amazing. And it all goes back to this idea of transmuting our pain into purpose. And it's so contagious how when we help others and when others receive, and not from an individual, and it's definitely not to take credit, right? Like, no one's a healer here. We're not selling that. This is just about connection, support, and having a toolbox that's well equipped for the job. And when we receive that help from others, almost, at that moment of enlightenment, we just go, oh, I want to help more people do this now.
Yeah.
And I think this is a human quality that we need to shine a little bit more light on, and how contagious helping others really is.
It is. And I think so many of us that work in this field have our own story, just like I do. And that's why we do this is, I've been through hell. I put my family through hell. And if I can help somebody else get out of it and find the way out the way that I did, man, what a blessing. What a gift.
Yeah. All right, Matt Brown, there's a brother listening right now, a brother or sister listening right now. He needs your help. He needs to call in. Give it to him.
To anyone who's struggling out there right now, I understand you. Like I said earlier, my details of my story and the details of your story may be very, very different. The trauma that I went through may be very different from what you've been through. But there's a lot of similarities, and those similarities live in those feelings that we have. And the biggest one that keeps us stuck is fear. So for today, be willing to overcome that fear, and whether it's with me, and I welcome anybody to call me, to reach out to me. I'll give you contact information whenever you're ready for that, Adam, but reach out. Do not try to do this alone. You do not have to do this alone. We're not meant to do this alone. Believe me, I will get as much out of this as you will, just by you giving me the opportunity to help. And I'm not talking about financially. I'm talking about the emotional rewards of just being able to be that person that for today, maybe you can trust to pick up the phone or get on the computer and reach out to, and just know that I'm here for you. And if I'm not the right fit to help you, I will help you find somebody that is. Like, the community of people that I work with, span the globe, and we're here to help. And I guess, that's a very long-winded way of saying, don't stay stuck in fear. Don't let fear paralyze you.
Beautiful. Matt Brown, Freedom Interventions. He's also co-hosting the Party Wreckers podcast. Why is it called Party Wreckers?
The guy that trained me back in the day to do interventions, it was kind of an inside joke between he and I. I was very new to the field, and I would do what's called, sit second chair. I would go along and just kind of tag along and sit and learn by observation and eventually participation in some of these interventions. And we had this inside joke. He's like, okay, here come the party wreckers, and he was not able to stay sober. This is a man who'd been through the first Gulf War, had a lot of military trauma. Wow. and really was a brilliant man and had a heart for this work, but had his own demons that just took him out. And eventually he died of an overdose. And so this is really my homage to him. The name of our podcast, The Party Wreckers, is really just a way to, kind of, without being direct about it, just to acknowledge his influence on me and the work that I do.
Wow. Matt, I really feel your heart in all of this. I really feel the essence of someone who's been through it, who has hurt others, and who has come out on the other side. This is your redemption arc. This is the pathway. I don't want to project too much onto you, but into self-forgiveness, perhaps.
That has been one of the themes of this last year for me, is really compassion and forgiveness of self.
Yes, because we can forgive others. We can say the words outside of ourselves, but we know as men, it's often the hardest path to forgive ourselves.
Oh yeah, and that's at the core. I mean, that's how I found you guys.
Yeah,
doing a lot of that inner child work, that internal family systems work, where I go back and try to heal those old wounds and reparent myself in a way that's much more compassionate than what I experienced. I mean, that's how I found you guys. Was through the man that I'm working with. So it's all coming together.
It's all coming together. Matt Brown, if brothers and sisters are interested, where can they find you?
So my website is freedominterventions.com. And on there, you can find the phone number. If you want to email me, it's matt@freedominterventions.com. And the partner that I have, the co-host on the podcast, has recently developed kind of a new platform. Sometimes, depending on the experience level of the interventionist, it could take, thousands of dollars to get an intervention put together, hire the interventionist, pay for their time. Yeah. And not every family has those resources. And so he developed this online platform called interventiononcall.com, where for $150 an hour, there's a number of us interventionists that are on there, and we will coach families on doing their own interventions.
I love
that. So that the financial barrier that sometimes can be there, can be removed. And sometimes some families just don't need to hire an intervention. They just need some coaching. And so that's another platform that I'm on there where people can find me and a number of other wonderful interventionists.
Powerful. I'll just drop in here. Sacred Sons has a robust scholarship program. I love to just acknowledge, we live in a capitalistic system. We didn't invent it, and there's ways to continue to help in these ways. So I really love this platform idea, because support is closer than you think. And so what's really important here is that we reach out, whether we are someone who's supporting another or whether we are the one who needs to support ourselves. Pick up the phone, get online. Support has never been closer. Reach out. With that, Matt, is there any final words, any inspiration that you would like to leave with the brothers and the sisters who are listening?
Well, I'm going to say that most people are getting inspired by coming here in the first place. I know I have, as I've listened to previous episodes. I'm so grateful to be a part of this. And just, if you're struggling, reach out. Let this be the day. You don't have to live in a struggle with addiction one more day. Today can be the day.
Today is the day. With that, Matt Brown, Freedom Interventions, Adam Jackson, Sacred Sons. We're out, family. Peace.